There's a strange kind of silence that shows up when you start thinking about time. Not the time on the clock, not the schedule, not the calendar. The other kind. The kind that makes you look at your life and wonder, did I wait too long? Did I move too soon? Did I miss something? Should I be further by now? Was I supposed to become someone different already? And nobody always knows you are asking those questions, because from the outside, you may look fine. You may be working, showing up, handling life, doing what needs to be done, taking care of business. But in the inside of your mind, of your soul, there is this quiet comparison happening. Not always with other people. Sometimes with the version of your life you thought you would have by now. You know those expectations you had? The age you thought you would be married? The year you thought you would be stable? The season you thought your business would grow? The time you thought your body would change? The moment you thought your confidence will finally arrive? The chapter you thought would already be behind you, yet you still see it. And when life doesn't match the timeline you imagined, it can make you question more than just your progress. It can make you question yourself, your life, your whole existence. Welcome back to the Eminence Legacy podcast. I'm Jose Luis Cadena, and this is Midnight Questions, the space where we do not rush past what is quietly telling the truth. Now, tonight's question is not loud, but it follows people. It follows the young person who feels behind before life even started. It follows a grown man who wonders if he wasted his strongest years. It follows a woman who keeps asking if she gave too much time to the wrong things or the wrong person. It follows a dreamer who started late, the leader who started early, the parent who had to grow while still healing, the person who keeps staring at the calendar like it can explain the ache they feel. Tonight, we sit with this. What if it's not too late and it was never too early? See, most people are not just afraid of failure. They are afraid of timing. They are afraid of being too late to become who they were supposed to be. Too late to start. Too late to change. Too late to rebuild. Too late to learn. Too late to heal. Too late to love differently. Too late to become disciplined. Too late to be taken seriously. Too late to finally become the person they kept postponing to be. And on the other side, the flip side to this. See, some people are carrying a different wound. They feel like they started too early. They had responsibility too early. They became strong too early. They had to grow up before they knew who they were. They feel like they never had a childhood or an innocence. They carried pressure before they had language. They stepped into rooms before they felt ready. They made decisions before they understood the cost. Some of them became dependable before they were developed. And both sides hurt. They're both hurting. The person who feels late carries regret. The person who feels early carries weight. And sometimes both live inside the same person. You feel behind because part of you never got to grow at a normal pace. And you feel tired because another part of you had to become responsible before you were ready. That's why this question matters. Because time is not just something we measure. Sometimes time is something we grieve. There is a version of life many of us carry in our head, in our mind, in our soul. A silent timeline that says, by this age, I should have had this. By that year, I should have been there. By now, I should know who I am. By now, I should be stronger. By now, I should be further. By now, I should not still be dealing with this. And that silent timeline can become cruel. It can become painful. Because it does not care what you survived. It does not care what you had to carry. It does not care what you were never taught. It does not care what broke your confidence. It does not care what delayed your healing. It does not care what responsibly changed your direction. It just keeps whispering, you should be further. You should have been further by now. And if you listen to that voice too long, you stop seeing your life clearly. You stop progressing. You stop seeing survival. You stop seeing maturity. You stop seeing the fact that some of those years you called wasted were actually the years that taught you what you could no longer afford to ignore. They taught you lessons that built your character. That doesn't mean every delay was good. That's not what I'm saying. It doesn't mean every mistake was necessary. I get you. It doesn't mean pain automatically becomes purpose. See, I'm not trying to sugarcoat this. But what it does mean is this. Your timeline is not the whole truth about your life. That's a part about your life, but that doesn't tell you the whole story. Sometimes the calendar can show you what happened, but it cannot explain what God was forming. It cannot measure what survival cost you. It cannot count the strength that came from quiet endurance, from those moments. It cannot tell the full story of what was being rebuilt inside while nothing seemed to be moving outside of you. That's why you have to be careful, because if the timeline becomes your ruler, shame will become your language. Let me say that again. Because if the timeline becomes your ruler, shame will become your language. Maybe you think you started too late. Too late to get serious. Too late to change your body. Too late to fix your finances. Too late to go back to school. Too late to become disciplined. Too late to build the dream. Too late to repair the relationship. Too late to become the kind of person you respected. And maybe there is pain there. Maybe the hurt is still there. Maybe that wound is still bleeding. Maybe there are years you wish you handled differently. Maybe there were moments you ignored. Maybe you delayed things you should have faced sooner. Hey, I get it. I've been there. Maybe you let fear, comfort, survival, insecurity, or pride keep you still longer than you should have. That deserves honesty, not shame, honesty. Because regret can teach, but shame paralyzes. Regret says, look at what happened, learn from it. Shame says, you are what happened, stay there. And tonight, I need you to hear the difference. You may have started later than you wanted. But late does not mean lifeless. Late does not mean useless. Late does not mean disqualified. Late does not mean God has no material left to work with. Some things in you may have arrived late because you were still learning the cost of living unawake. Some convictions had to come after consequences. Some clarity had to come after confusion. Some discipline had to come after disappointments. Some strength had to come after being tired of your own patterns. And maybe that's not the story you wanted, but it can still become the place where you stop negotiating with life. See, the danger is not starting late. The danger is using late as a reason to never start. That is where people lose years twice. First the delay, then grieving the delay so long. But maybe your pain is different. Maybe you didn't start late. Maybe life started asking too much from you too early. Maybe you had to be mature before you were ready. Maybe people needed you before you understood yourself. Maybe you became the strong one because nobody else could carry it. Nobody else was willing to step up to the plate, but you did. Maybe you had learned responsibility before you learned rest. Maybe you were pushed into decisions before you had the wisdom. Maybe you became useful before you felt known. And now, people praise your strength, but they do not always know what the cost is. They see the version of you that handles things. They don't always see the version that wonders who you would have been if you had more time to become instead of survive. That is a different ache, because starting too early can make you successful and still leave parts of you underdeveloped. You can become capable but disconnected, reliable but tired, strong but unheld, advanced but still carrying old fears. And sometimes you don't even know how to explain it, because people assume early strength means you were ready. But sometimes early strength only means you had no other choice. And if that's you, I want you to say this gently. You are allowed to mature in the places where life forced you to function. You are allowed to revisit parts of yourself that had to grow too fast. You are allowed to become whole, even if you became stronger first. Because strength without healing can become a beautiful cage. Everyone admires it. Everyone wishes they could have one. But you still feel trapped inside of it. So maybe the deeper question tonight is not, was I too late? Or was I too early? Maybe the deeper question is, what did time teach me that I kept refusing to honor? Again, maybe the deeper question is, what did time teach me that I kept refusing to honor? Because some of you keep arguing with your timeline instead of learning from it. You keep resenting when things happen. You keep those people that hurt you in the back of your mind. You can't let go. You're trapped, reliving the moment, instead of asking what those seasons revealed. You keep looking at the years like they only took from you, when some of those years also showed you what was real, what you wanted, what you could carry, what you could not keep pretending. Who was with you? Who was using you? Where you were strong, where you weren't hiding, where you needed healing, where you needed discipline, where you needed God. Time has a way of exposing things, and sometimes the timeline you hate was the mirror you needed. Not because everything was good, not because everything was perfect, but because everything revealed. There is something humbling about trusting God with timing, because most of us do not just want direction. We want dates. We want guarantees. We want to know when the door will open, when the pain will make sense, when the work will pay off, when the waiting will end, when the rebuilding will finally feel visible. But faith does not always hand us a schedule or a timeline. Sometimes faith gives us enough light for obedience. Faith is that what you do not see. Not enough details for control. And that is hard, because control feels safer than trust. A timeline feels safer than surrender. A deadline feels safer than development. But some of what God forms in people, that character, that grit, that perseverance, does not fit neatly into the calendar they imagined. And that doesn't mean we become passive. That doesn't mean we sit back and call delay faith. No, that's not what I'm saying. Don't get it twisted. This is not what I'm trying to say. What I'm saying is, faith is not passivity. Faith still moves. Faith still obeys. Faith still takes responsibility. Faith still builds. But faith does not worship the timeline. It learns to honor the moment. And maybe tonight, the question is not whether your life happened exactly when you wanted to. Maybe the question is, can you still be faithful with the moment you have? Because this moment is not nothing. This moment is grounded. This moment is breath. This moment is responsibility. This moment is mercy. This moment is an invitation. And if you keep staring at what you think you missed, you may miss what is still being handed to you. See, we worry too much about tomorrow's blessings, and we forget to enjoy the blessings of today. So what do you do with a question like this? You don't attack yourself. You do not pretend that past didn't matter. You do not romanticize the pain. You don't waste tonight punishing yourself for the years you cannot relive. You sit with the truth. You battle with it. You struggle with it. And then you ask better questions. Ask yourself, what part of me still feels behind? Not what looks behind, what feels behind. Your confidence, your discipline, your finances, your healing, your faith, your identity, your courage, your relationships. Name it without shaming it, because what remains unnamed keeps speaking in the background. The second question I want you to ask yourself is, what part of me had to grow too early? The responsible part, the strong part, the protective part, the part that learned not to ask for help, the part that became useful before it felt loved, the part that had to perform maturity before it had peace. Name that too, because some of your exhaustion may not be from what you are doing now. It may be from how long you have been carrying what started back then. Question number 3. What would faithfulness look like in this moment? Not in the version of life you imagined. Not in the timeline you wish you had. In this moment, what would it look like to stop arguing with time and start leading what is still in your hands? One decision, one conversation, one act of discipline, one honest prayer, one step to healing, one plan, one apology, one boundary, one beginning. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop asking whether it's too late. And finally become faithful with the now. And tonight, before you close your eyes, do one small thing. Write down one thing you are proud of surviving. Not one thing you achieved. One thing you survived. One season, one decision, one loss, one pressure, one version of yourself you had to carry when you didn't know how. Write it down. Look at it for a moment. And don't rush past it. Because sometimes you are so focused on where you think you should be that you forget what it took for you to still be here. Let that be the last thought you sit with tonight. Not regret, not shame, not the timeline, just this quiet truth. I'm still here, and that matters. So before we close, sit with this for a second. Maybe your life did not move the way you imagined or the way you liked. Maybe some things happened too early. Maybe some things started later than you wanted it. Maybe some doors took longer. Maybe some lessons cost more. Maybe some years still ache when you think about them. But you are still here, and that matters more than you know. There is still breath in your body. There is still responsibility in your hands. There is still room for obedience. There is still room for healing. There is still room for discipline. And there is still room for God to work with what remains. See, when you're the weakest, He's the strongest. So maybe the question tonight is not, did I miss my time? Maybe the question is, what am I going to do with the time that is still mine? That question has weight. And maybe that question has mercy too. If this episode finds you tonight, do not let it be temporary visit. If you're listening to this on a web browser or link, maybe someone texted you this. Don't let this be temporary visit. Hit follow right now on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. See, legacy builders do not just visit truth. They stay connected to it. And if you know someone who feels behind, or someone who had to grow up too early, too soon, send them this. No long explanation, just send it. Sometimes the right question can reach a place advice has not been able to touch. It is not too late, and it was never too early. Not because everything happened perfectly, not because everything looked good, not because every delay was good either, not because every early burden was fair, but because your life is not only measured by when things happen, it is also measured by who you become with what happened. So release the lie that your timeline has the final word. It does not. The past can explain some things. It can teach you some things. It can reveal some things. But it does not get to rule the moment you still have. Tonight, do not rush to fix everything. Do not punish yourself. Do not rehearse regret until it becomes a second prison. Just ask the question honestly. What is still mine to lead now? This is the Eminence Legacy podcast. This is Midnight Questions, and I'm your host, Jose Luis Cadena. Have a peaceful night, and remember, those questions do not show up to disturb you. They show up to direct you. And remember, together, let's rise to our eminence. Catch you on the next one. Before we close, quick reminder. If you've been listening to this podcast and you know you do not need more information, you need structure. We built something for that. The Eminence Circle. A discipleship leadership room for people who are done drifting and ready to take responsibility for their own life. It's application-based and limited. If that sounds like you, go to eminencelegacylife.com and apply. Some people listen, others build. It's time to build your legacy.